History tells us that Columbus discovered America. But what if that story is only the beginning? Across this vast continent lie mysteries that textbooks rarely mention. A colony that vanished without a trace, copper mines that fed a Bronze Age thousands of miles away, giants remembered in myth and newspaper headlines, and whispers of Europeans who crossed the ocean long before 1492. This is not the history you learned in school. This is America's lost histories. For most of us, the story of America's discovery begins in 1492. Christopher Columbus, sailing west under the Spanish crown, stumbled into lands he believed were Asia. From there, Spain and Portugal carved new empires across the seas, igniting an age of conquest and colonization. In this official version, they were the first Europeans to set foot on the New World, the true beginning of American history. But history, as it is usually told, is selective. It emphasizes certain victories, certain explorers, while overlooking the fragments of older, stranger tales. And when we pause to look closely, we find something extraordinary. The possibility that the story of America begins not in 1492, but centuries, perhaps even millennia earlier. Archaeologists uncover copper tools and ornaments whose origins remain unexplained. Historians stumble upon maps that seem to show the coastline of the Americas long before Europeans officially discovered them. And indigenous traditions preserve memories of pale visitors from across the sea, long before the arrival of Columbus or Cortez. Were these encounters real, or are they echoes of myth? Even in the early colonial years, mystery flourished. The first English colony of Roanoke vanished into the forests of North Carolina, leaving behind nothing but a single word carved on a tree: Croatoan. Meanwhile, across the Mississippi Valley, an ancient city named Cahokia once rose higher than London or Paris of its time, with pyramids of earth aligned to the stars, only to collapse and be forgotten by most history books. And further north, along the Great Lakes, ancient copper mines seem to have produced hundreds of thousands of tons of metal, so much that scholars still wonder where it all went. Was it used here by indigenous peoples, or did some of it leave these shores entirely, carried across an ocean? These stories, half fact, half legend, do not replace the history we know, but they complicate it. They suggest that America's past is not a straight line beginning in 1492, but a vast web of mysteries and forgotten connections. And the more we follow these clues, the more the old certainties begin to crack. So let us return to the very edge of the known story and peer beyond it. Because America's lost histories may be far older and far stranger than we ever imagined.
Well, that sounds like trouble. If even history itself can vanish without a trace, then what hope do my lost carrots have? Chapter 1. Roanoke, the colony that vanished.
In the late 16th century, England gazed across the Atlantic with both envy and determination. Spain had become rich on the treasures of the Americas, Portugal commanded the seas, and England wanted a place of its own. In 1587, Sir Walter Raleigh sponsored a bold plan to establish a colony on the coast of North America. It would be called Roanoke. More than 100 settlers embarked, men, women, and children, farmers, craftsmen, and families seeking a new beginning. Their hopes were high, though the journey was harsh, with storms, hunger, and uncertainty at every turn. When at last they landed on Roanoke Island off present-day North Carolina, they saw a land of forests, fertile soil, and wide waters. It seemed promising, a place where England might truly take root. The settlers wasted no time. Simple wooden houses were built, a palisade rose around their village, and gardens were sown. For a moment, the settlement must have felt like a tiny England transplanted into America. Axes rang through the trees, smoke curled from cooking fires, and children explored the edges of the clearing. At night they sat by the glow of flames, telling stories of the homes they had left behind, and imagining the future that might grow here. Governor John White led them with cautious optimism. An artist as well as a leader, he painted the landscapes, plants, and native peoples of the region, images that remain among the few windows into this lost chapter of history. For the settlers, Roanoke was meant to be more than survival. It was a foothold for Protestant England, a rival to Spain's empire, and perhaps even the seed of a new society. Yet shadows soon appeared. Supplies were scarce, and the settlers realized that survival would depend on both their labor and their relations with local tribes. Some encounters showed promise, others tension. Trust was fragile, and the forests around them held both resources and threats. Storms lashed the coast, and disease was never far away. Every day demanded endurance. Still, in those first months, hope remained stronger than fear. They dreamed of trade, of fertile harvests, of land to claim and children to raise. They believed they were writing the first lines of England's story in America. As they hammered timbers, sowed seeds, and prayed for good fortune, they felt history pressing close around them. But none among them could imagine that their colony, born of ambition and fragile hope, would vanish into silence, leaving behind one of the greatest mysteries in the history of the New World.
Chapter 2. The Copper That Disappeared.
For a time, Roanoke settlers clung to hope, but their survival depended on fresh supplies. In 1587, Governor John White sailed back to England, promising to return quickly with food and reinforcements. He left behind his daughter, his granddaughter Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America, and more than 100 souls who trusted he would not abandon them. Yet fate intervened. England was at war with Spain, and the seas were consumed by conflict. The Spanish Armada threatened invasion, and every ship was needed at home. White found himself trapped in England, desperate to return, yet powerless as years passed. Only in 1590, 3 long years later, did he finally sail back across the Atlantic. When he reached Roanoke Island, the settlement was silent. The houses stood weathered and empty. Fortifications had been dismantled with care, not destroyed. No bodies, no signs of violence, only absence. The settlers were gone. White searched for a clue. On a post, carved in clear letters, was a single word: Croatoan. Another carving, the letters C-R-O, appeared on a tree nearby. There was no sign of distress, no cross of Maltese, the agreed signal of danger. It seemed the colonists had left willingly, perhaps to join the friendly Croatoan tribe on nearby Hatteras Island. But storms and failing supplies forced White to turn back before he could investigate further. He never saw his family again. What became of the lost colony? Theories have multiplied over the centuries. Some suggest they assimilated with local tribes, vanishing into native communities. Others imagine they tried to sail back to England and perished at sea. Still others whisper of starvation, conflict, or capture. The mystery has fueled speculation for more than 400 years. Archaeological digs have uncovered fragments, European tools found at native sites, traces of English-style pottery far inland. These hints suggest some colonists survived, blending with local peoples, but the full story remains hidden. No graves, no final records, only silence where a community once lived. For England, Roanoke was both a tragedy and a lesson. The colony had vanished, but the dream of America endured. Within 2 decades, a new venture would rise in Virginia, Jamestown, built in part on the memory of Roanoke's disappearance. The word Croatoan remains one of the most haunting inscriptions in history. A single word carved into wood, standing in place of more than 100 vanished lives. It is a reminder that the beginnings of America were not triumph alone, but loss and mystery as well. The mystery of Roanoke has never faded. Generations have asked, what truly became of the colonists? In the absence of records, imagination has filled the silence. Theories abound, some plausible, others drifting into the realm of legend. The most accepted idea is assimilation. Archaeologists have found European tools at native settlements. And even reports from later English explorers spoke of tribes with gray eyes or words that echoed English. Perhaps the colonists joined the Croatoan or other nearby peoples, the called Croatoan pocket, their identities absorbed into a new way of life. It would explain the lack of bodies and the careful dismantling of the fort. Another theory is starvation and dispersal. Faced with dwindling supplies, small groups may have ventured inland to seek food. Separated from one another, they could have been absorbed, lost, or killed without leaving trace. A quiet end, scattered and unrecorded. Some accounts hint at violence. Certain tribes viewed the English as intruders, and conflict was always near. Stories of sudden attacks or of settlers captured and enslaved linger in rumor. Yet no mass grave has ever been found. There are stranger ideas too. In the centuries since, writers have imagined ghosts, curses, even supernatural forces. The carved word Croatoan itself has grown mythic, appearing in later tales as a sign of death or disappearance. Such legends reveal less about the colony than about the human need to explain the unexplained. Even in modern times, the search continues. Excavations on Hatteras Island and the mainland have uncovered shards of English pottery, hints that survivors traveled inland. But the pieces are too few to form a full picture. We are left with fragments, suggestive but incomplete. What is certain is this: Roanoke became a warning and a symbol, a warning that the New World was unforgiving, and a symbol of endurance, the determination to keep trying despite failure. Jamestown, founded in 1607, was built in the shadow of Roanoke's loss, its settlers haunted by the fate of those who came before. The lost colony is remembered not for what it achieved, but for the questions it left unanswered. Were they pioneers who adapted and survived, or victims of hunger and conflict? Did Virginia Dare grow to adulthood among native peoples, or did she perish with the colony? We may never know. In the silence of Roanoke's abandoned fort, history leaves us with mystery, and with the reminder that not every story finds an ending.
Chapter 2. The Copper That Disappeared.
Far from the coastlines of Roanoke, another mystery lies buried deep in the American landscape. Around the shores of the Great Lakes, especially Isle Royale and the Keweenaw Peninsula in present-day Michigan, archaeologists have discovered the remains of vast ancient copper mines. Tunnels, pits, and hammerstones, tens of thousands of them, stretch across the region, evidence of large-scale activity that began more than 5,000 years ago. The scale is staggering. Researchers estimate that prehistoric miners removed hundreds of thousands of tons of pure copper. Without iron tools, they used fire to crack the rock, then hammered the metal free with stone mauls. They carried the ore to the surface, shaping it into tools, ornaments, and weapons. What has puzzled historians for centuries is not that they mined copper, but how much they mined, and what became of it all. The native cultures of the region certainly valued copper. Artifacts of extraordinary craftsmanship have been found: knives, axes, spear points, even intricate beads. These objects spread widely, appearing in burial sites and ceremonial caches across North America. Copper was both useful and sacred, a gift from the earth, shaped by human hands. But the known artifacts account for only a fraction of the copper removed. Where did the rest go? By the 19th century, when modern prospectors reopened mines, they were astonished by the scope of the ancient work. Massive boulders bore the scars of hammering, and wooden supports preserved in waterlogged shafts revealed the ingenuity of the miners. It was clear that generations of laborers had toiled here long before Europeans arrived. Yet written history held no record of who they were or why the mining eventually stopped. Some scholars believe the answer is simple. much of the copper was melted down and reused countless times, leaving little trace in the archaeological record. Others suggest that ancient trade networks carried copper across the continent, from the Mississippi Valley to the Atlantic coast, its origins forgotten over time. Still, the sheer volume extracted raises enduring questions. Could some of the copper have traveled even farther? A few researchers have speculated about transoceanic contact, the idea that old world civilizations might have obtained copper from America long before Columbus. Mainstream archaeology remains cautious, but the theory persists, fed by the sheer mystery of the missing metal. What is undeniable is that the Great Lakes mines reveal a level of organization and industry far greater than once imagined for ancient North America. Here, long before Europeans, people dug deep into the earth, harnessing knowledge, skill, and determination to transform raw stone into tools of survival and symbols of power. The mines stand as monuments to forgotten labor, and as the first chapter of one of America's deepest mysteries, the copper that disappeared.
Chapter 3. Cahokia, the Forgotten Metropolis.
Not all of America's mysteries are about what was lost. Some are about what was built, and how such grandeur could be forgotten. In the heart of the Mississippi Valley, across the river from present-day St. Louis, lay Cahokia, the greatest city of pre-Columbian North America. At its height around the year 1100 CE, Cahokia covered nearly 6 square miles. It contained plazas, neighborhoods, ceremonial centers, and more than 120 earthen mounds. The largest of these, Monk's Mound, rose 10 stories high, a flat-topped pyramid of soil that required millions of baskets of earth to construct. From its summit, rulers and priests oversaw a city that thrived with life, ceremony, and trade. Estimates suggest 20,000 people or more lived here, a population rivaling or exceeding many medieval European cities. Archaeological digs revealed dense housing districts, evidence of organized streets, and a sophisticated social hierarchy. There were craftsmen shaping shell and copper into ornaments, farmers cultivating maize in surrounding fields, and traders bringing goods from the Great Lakes, the Gulf Coast, and the Rocky Mountains. Cahokia was a crossroads of cultures, where ideas and materials converged. Its ceremonial core was marked by Woodhenge, a great circle of wooden posts aligned with the solstices. Here, priests observed the movements of the sun, linking the rhythms of heaven to the order of earthly life. Religious festivals bound the people together, reinforcing the authority of Cahokia's elite. The city's rise was sudden. By about 1050 CE, construction surged, population swelled, and Cahokia transformed from a regional center into a metropolis. Why this rapid growth occurred is still debated. Perhaps it was the draw of fertile lands, or a moment of political consolidation, or the inspiration of new religious movements. Whatever the cause, the result was a flourishing city unmatched in its time. Yet, for all its scale and influence, Cahokia vanished from memory for centuries. When Europeans first explored the Mississippi Valley, the city was already abandoned, its mounds overgrown, its people dispersed. But during its peak, Cahokia stood as a reminder that the Americas were home to complex civilizations, long before European contact. Cahokia was not only a city of people and power, it was a city of the stars. Its planners looked to the heavens as much as the earth, aligning their constructions with celestial rhythms. This blending of astronomy and architecture gave the metropolis a sacred geometry, connecting its people to cosmic order. At the heart of this vision stood Woodhenge, great circles of wooden posts, carefully positioned to mark the rising and setting of the sun at solstices and equinoxes. From a central viewing point, priests and rulers could watch the sun align with posts on the horizon, heralding the turning of the seasons. These events were more than astronomy. They were ritual, a confirmation that human life was woven into the cycles of the universe. Monk's Mound, the largest earthen structure in the Americas, was also part of this cosmic design. Its placement and orientation appear intentional, echoing both solar movements and the flow of the nearby river. From its summit, leaders ruled not just by earthly authority, but as intermediaries between sky and soil. The very landscape became a stage for power, sanctified by the stars. Cahokia's builders mastered engineering on a massive scale. Tens of thousands of workers shaped soil into platforms, pyramids, and terraces. They created plazas large enough to host thousands for ceremonies and gatherings. Archaeologists have found evidence of palisades, huge wooden walls that encircled parts of the city, protecting sacred precincts and emphasizing social divisions. Such construction required planning, labor organization, and a collective vision. Even residential districts showed order. Rows of houses, storage pits, and workshops suggest coordinated layouts, not haphazard growth. The city was designed, not merely accumulated. And at its core, the orientation of structures reflected the rhythms of sun and stars, reminding its people that they lived in harmony with cosmic forces. Cahokia's architecture was thus more than utility. It was a statement that the city was the center of a universe where human society mirrored celestial patterns. Through astronomy and architecture, Cahokia inscribed its people into the cosmos itself.
No city, no matter how great, lasts forever. Cahokia, once the beating heart of the Mississippi Valley, followed the same arc as so many civilizations: a rise to power, a flourishing, and then decline. By the time Europeans first crossed the region in the 1500s, the mounds stood silent, the plazas empty. The metropolis had already been abandoned for centuries. What caused its fall? The answer is complex, a tapestry of pressures woven over time. One thread is environmental stress. As Cahokia grew, the demand for food, timber, and fertile land increased dramatically. Forests were cut to fuel fires and build palisades. Fields stretched outward to feed tens of thousands of people. This intensity may have eroded the soil and strained the ecosystem, making the city increasingly fragile. Climate also played its part. Around 1200 CE, the region experienced episodes of drought, part of broader climatic shifts. For a society so dependent on maize agriculture, failed harvests could trigger famine, unrest, and migration. Hunger gnaws not only at stomachs, but at the bonds of society. There is evidence of violence as well. Archaeologists have uncovered signs of conflict, mass graves, burned structures, and rapid fortification of the city's core. Perhaps rival groups pressed against Cahokia's influence, or internal strife tore at its fabric. The palisades that once symbolized sacred boundaries may have become walls of defense. Religion, too, may have shifted. The rituals that bound people to the city's leaders could have lost their power in times of hardship. Without spiritual cohesion, authority waned. What was once a metropolis of faith and order may have fractured into doubt and dispersal. By the 14th century, Cahokia was largely deserted. The people did not vanish, but dispersed into smaller communities, their traditions carried into new forms. The mounds remained, silent witnesses to a past that few remembered. Cahokia's decline is not just a story of collapse. It is also a reminder of resilience, that cultures change, adapt, and endure in ways that are not always visible in ruins. Yet its abandonment left a haunting lesson. Even the greatest cities can fall when nature, conflict, and human choices converge.
Chapter 4. Giants of America?
In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, American newspapers brimmed with sensational tales. Among the most curious were reports of giants unearthed from ancient burial mounds.
Headlines declared skeletons 7 to 9 feet tall, found by farmers, construction crews, and even amateur archaeologists across the Midwest and beyond. The stories often followed a familiar pattern. A mound would be opened, human remains discovered, and the size of the bones proclaimed extraordinary. Some articles described double rows of teeth, others spoke of massive skulls, or weapons too large for ordinary men to wield. These accounts fueled a public imagination already fascinated with the mysteries of the continent's past. Many of these reports appeared in respected local papers, not just fringe publications. The New York Times itself carried several articles describing oversized skeletons discovered in places like Wisconsin, Ohio, and Tennessee. For readers of the time, such accounts blurred the line between archaeology and legend, fact and fantasy. Skeptics, however, have long questioned the reliability of these reports. Newspapers of the era were prone to exaggeration, and competition for sensational headlines was fierce. Bones could have been mismeasured, or in some cases belonged to people with medical conditions that caused unusual size. Others suspect simple hoaxes, crafted to draw attention and sell papers. Still, the persistence of these stories is striking. From small-town presses to national outlets, the idea of a vanished race of giants captured the American imagination. It suggested that beneath the mounds lay not only artifacts of past cultures, but evidence of something larger and stranger than history had yet admitted. Long before newspaper headlines spoke of giant skeletons, native peoples of North America told stories of beings who were larger than life. Across many traditions, giants appear not just as mythic figures, but as ancestral memories woven into the fabric of oral history. Among the Paiutes of Nevada, legend spoke of the Siteka, a race of red-haired giants who were said to have lived in the region long ago. According to the stories, they were fierce and warlike, preying upon the smaller tribes until they were finally defeated and driven into caves. The Lovelock Cave discovery in the early 20th century, where unusual bones and artifacts were found, rekindled fascination with these accounts. The Choctaw spoke of a people known as the Nahulo, tall, powerful figures who came from the west and fought great battles. The Comanche described a race of white giants, so tall that the tallest of the Comanche came only to their chest. These beings were said to be strong, skilled in warfare, and ultimately destroyed in ancient conflicts. Even the Iroquois carried tales of stone giants, fearsome beings who roamed the forests, sometimes as protectors, sometimes as threats. For many tribes, such stories explained the great mounds, the oversized tools, or unusual bones occasionally uncovered. They were not merely legends, but part of a living cosmology that linked the land, its features, and its mysteries to human memory. Scholars often interpret these giants as symbolic, representations of enemy tribes, forces of nature, or the power of ancestors. Yet the persistence of these stories across cultures, separated by distance and language, suggests they held a deeper resonance. For the native peoples, the giants were not forgotten curiosities. They were reminders of an earlier age, when the world was raw, its boundaries between myth and history still blurred. And so, when settlers and archaeologists later unearthed bones that seemed unusually large, the old stories gained new life. The legends of giants were already there, waiting, echoing through generations, long before the headlines.
Chapter 5. Pre-Columbian Europeans.
When we speak of Europeans reaching America before Columbus, one case stands on firm ground: the Vikings. Unlike tales of giants or half-remembered myths, this story is written in archaeology as much as in saga. Around the year 1000 CE, Norse explorers from Greenland, led by Leif Erikson, set sail westward. Their voyages are described in the Icelandic sagas, the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eric the Red. They spoke of a land called Vinland, rich with timber, fish, and wild grapes. For centuries, scholars debated whether these tales were fact or legend. The answer came in the 1960s, on the northern tip of Newfoundland. At L'Anse aux Meadows, archaeologists uncovered the remains of Norse buildings, sod and wood structures remarkably similar to those in Greenland and Iceland. Iron nails, a spindle whorl, and evidence of boat repair confirmed a Viking presence. This was no random shipwreck, but a settlement, however temporary. Radiocarbon dating placed it precisely in the early 11th century, centuries before Columbus ever set sail. The site suggests that the Vikings intended to establish a base for exploration, perhaps even colonization. But challenges were immense. The land was far from their established colonies in Greenland. Relations with the indigenous peoples, described as the Skrælings in the sagas, were tense and sometimes violent. Isolation and difficulty in sustaining the outpost likely forced its abandonment. Still, the discovery of L'Anse aux Meadows changed the historical narrative. No longer was Columbus the sole harbinger of Europe in the New World. The Norse had crossed the Atlantic half a millennium earlier, linking continents in ways only hinted at in legend. Even today, researchers search for more evidence of Vinland further south, in hopes of finding new traces of Viking presence. But whether temporary or sustained, the Viking landfall proves one thing clearly: Columbus was not first. The North Atlantic had already been bridged by wooden ships, driven by courage and the winds of exploration.
Beyond the Vikings, other stories whisper of Europeans reaching the New World centuries before Columbus. Unlike L'Anse aux Meadows, these accounts rest on legend, speculation, and contested evidence, but they have captured imaginations for generations. One of the earliest tales is that of St. Brendan the Navigator, an Irish monk said to have voyaged into the Atlantic in the 6th century. The medieval text Navigatio Sancti Brendani describes his journey to a land of marvels, sometimes interpreted as Iceland, Greenland, or even North America. In the 1970s, adventurer Tim Severin built a leather boat following Brendan's description, and successfully sailed from Ireland to Newfoundland, demonstrating that such a voyage was technically possible. But whether Brendan truly set foot in America remains unproven. Another legend speaks of Prince Madoc of Wales, who, according to a late medieval chronicle, sailed west in the 12th century, seeking new lands. His supposed followers were said to have left traces among native tribes, even influencing languages and fortifications. For centuries, tales of Welsh Indians persisted, though no archaeological evidence has confirmed Madoc's journey. It may have been more myth than history, a romantic story crafted in later centuries. Then there are the Knights Templar. After their suppression in the early 14th century, rumors spread that fleets of Templar ships vanished into the Atlantic. Some fringe theories suggest they carried treasures, or themselves, to the shores of the New World. Supporters point to symbols in Nova Scotia's Oak Island mystery, or architectural motifs in early American settlements, but the evidence remains circumstantial and widely disputed. These tales, Brendan, Madoc, the Templars, occupy the hazy realm between possibility and myth. They remind us that the Atlantic was never an impassable wall, and that Europe's seafarers dreamed of lands beyond the horizon long before Columbus. But until firmer evidence emerges, they remain what they have always been: legends that inspire wonder, but cannot rewrite history.
History is written by the victors. The phrase is old, but its meaning is timeless. What survives in books and classrooms often reflects the story preferred by those in power, neatly ordered, polished, simplified. Yet the land of America, stretching from its forests to its deserts, from its mounds to its coasts, tells a far more complicated tale, one filled not only with triumphs, but with mysteries that refuse to stay buried. We began with Roanoke, the colony that vanished. For centuries, it has stood as a question mark at the dawn of European colonization, reminding us how fragile those early dreams were. The settlers disappeared, leaving behind little more than a word carved into a post, their fate forever unknown. Then we looked deeper into copper mines that may have fueled Bronze Age industries across the ocean. Was America connected to the Old World long before Columbus? The traces are tantalizing, though the verdict remains elusive. At Cahokia, we glimpsed the rise and fall of a city so vast and complex that it rivaled medieval metropolises of Europe. Its mounds, plazas, and astronomical alignments reveal a people who harnessed both earth and sky. Yet within a few generations, Cahokia faded, not into myth, but into neglect, its story nearly erased from mainstream history until archaeologists restored it to the map. We explored the tales of giants, some born from yellowed newspapers, others from native legends that carried memories of earlier times. Were these beings flesh and blood, or symbols of something larger? The answer matters less than the persistence of the stories, echoing across cultures, hinting at truths we have yet to fully understand. Finally, we traced the footsteps of Europeans who may have reached America long before 1492. The Vikings, whose sod houses at L'Anse aux Meadows speak with undeniable clarity. And the others, Brendan the Navigator, Prince Madoc the Knights Templar, whose tales remain in the twilight between legend and history. They may never be proven, yet they remind us that the ocean was never a true barrier, only a challenge. What unites all these chapters is not certainty, but possibility. The official narrative says Columbus opened the New World to Europe, but perhaps the New World was never truly closed. Perhaps it was always part of a larger web of contact, its stories obscured by time, politics, and the winners who chose what to record. For America's past is not just the story of one discovery, one conquest, or one people. It is a mosaic, filled with lost colonies, forgotten cities, whispered legends, and half-buried clues that invite us to keep asking questions. To remember that history is not fixed, but alive. A puzzle with missing pieces, waiting in the earth, the archives, and the stories of those once ignored. And so, we end this chapter, not with finality, but with an open door, because history is written by the victors.
Well, folks, that's the end of today's adventure. But hey, don't gallop off just yet. If you enjoyed unraveling America's mysteries with us, you can saddle up for even more. Check out our Timeless Tales membership for early access to chapters, behind-the-scenes extras, and a chance to help shape future stories. It's like being part of the expedition, minus the mosquito bites. And if you want to carry a piece of adventure with you, our merch shop is open. From shirts to mugs, it's the perfect way to show you're part of the crew. Every bit of support keeps our little team exploring, questioning, and telling tales the victors forgot to write down. Oh, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Otherwise, you might miss the next mystery. And trust me, the next one is big. So, until then, keep your eyes on the past and your hooves on the trail.